faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're diving into Empires of the Sea, subtitled The Contest for the Center of the World. It's the second volume in the Mediterranean epic trilogy, and written by British historian Roger Crowley. In the late 13th century, the Ottoman tribe in Asia Minor rapidly rose, establishing the mighty Ottoman Empire. Muslim Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, ending the Byzantine Empire. They then expanded westward, aiming to conquer Christian nations. Thus began an intense struggle between Christian and Islamic worlds across the Mediterranean. Both sides exhausted every tactic from small-scale raids to key island battles, even epic naval confrontations. Empires of the Sea chronicles this fierce Mediterranean rivalry between 1520 and 1580. The author chose these 6 decades because this period saw the most intense and consequential clashes. This 310,000-word masterpiece combined strategic analysis with vivid battle details, capturing that grand historical tapestry. In 2009, it was named Sunday Times History Book of the Year and a New York Times bestseller. I'll now unpack the book's essence in 3 parts. First, the duel between titans, Sultan Suleiman versus Charles V. Second, the siege of Malta, where Ottoman forces faced setbacks. Third, the Battle of Lepanto, Christian forces' desperate counterattack. Let's begin with part 1, the Suleiman-Charles V showdown. In 1453, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II captured Constantinople, fulfilling his lifelong ambition. Over the next 30 years, he conquered territories around the Black Sea and Balkans, landing in southern Italy in 1481 to march on Rome. But then, the ailing Mehmed II suddenly died. The Italian campaign abruptly ended, sparing Rome. Subsequent sultans continued expanding, annexing Syria, Egypt, and other eastern Mediterranean regions. Then came 1520. At 26, Suleiman ascended as the new sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Like his great-grandfather Mehmed II, he was an ambitious ruler. Shortly after taking the throne, he won 2 major battles, capturing Belgrade on the Danube and the Christian-controlled Rhodes. These victories greatly boosted his prestige and confidence. Suleiman aimed to complete his ancestors' unfinished mission, conquer the Western infidels, and achieve imperial dominance. Meanwhile, in the Christian world, there was also a powerful empire and a brilliant ruler. That ruler was Charles V, King of Spain. As heir to the powerful Habsburg dynasty, he ruled Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, and North Africa. Spain was then in the age of exploration. In the Americas, Spain held vast colonies, becoming an empire on which the sun never sets, before Britain. Thus, Charles V was the only Western monarch who could challenge Suleiman. Coincidentally, Charles felt a strong mission to defend Christendom. His dream was to defeat the aggressive Ottomans and retake Constantinople. Therefore, Spain and the Ottoman Empire, as Mediterranean superpowers, were destined for a deadly clash. Since the conflict was mainly naval, both sides worked to build powerful navies. This brings us to the galley, the key naval weapon in the Mediterranean. It was typically about 30 meters long and under 4 meters wide. For high speed, these ships had low freeboards and shallow drafts when loaded. Their sails only worked with favorable winds. In battle, for maneuverability, propulsion relied on oars extending from the sides. Each galley carried about 150 oarsmen, many of whom were slaves. These rowers were shackled to their benches, where they ate, slept, and relieved themselves, turning each galley into a stinking cesspool. In such dire conditions, mortality rates among rowers were extremely high. If sunk, slaves chained to seats had almost no escape chance. Thus, being a galley slave was the most miserable and terrifying job of that era. The galley's strengths and weaknesses were clear. Its advantages were high speed and flexibility in combat. Due to its shallow draft, it can easily approach shore, aiding amphibious operations. It can lurk in coastal waters, ready to ambush enemies, or dart around bulky sailing ships. But its weakness lies exactly here. These agile warships aren't storm-resistant. Once winter storms hit, they can't sail. Plus, needing constant fresh water for rowers restricts galleys to near-shore ops, limiting their range. So, Mediterranean sea battles then happen near islands and coasts, with fighting season only from April to October.
Of course, a strong navy needs not just ships but top commanders.
Charles V's naval chief Doria was a mercenary leader and adventurer from Genoa, with vast sea battle experience and sharp skills.
Unlike traditional Mediterranean powers, the Asian origin Ottomans weren't good at sea fights and lacked naval talent. But they learned fast and hired pragmatically, using conquered subjects' sea know-how to appoint the infamous pirate Hayreddin as admiral. From the 1530s, Spain and the Ottomans clashed fiercely at sea, mainly through raiding, not big battles. That's because Mediterranean ops depend on the weather. It's unpredictable. You never know what's next. In sea fights, sudden wind gusts or shifts could tip the balance. Long experience shows victory or defeat often hinges on tiny factors.
So, nations preferred raiding enemy lands over risky naval battles.
This drained foes' economies and captured residents as galley slaves, solving rower mortality issues. Over 30 years, from 1530 to 1560, the empires had a series of sea clashes. With cautious commanders, battles weren't huge, but three were significant. The first was Spain's conquest of Tunis. In 1534, Hayreddin led the Ottoman navy to raid southern Italy's coast. They burned villages, destroyed ships, captured many residents as slaves, then turned south and occupied Tunis in North Africa. Tunis sits on the central axis of the Mediterranean, close to strategic points like Sicily and Malta, giving the Ottomans a springboard to invade Sicily and Italy. Something Charles V absolutely couldn't tolerate. And so he decided to personally lead the campaign to retake Tunis. In June the following year, Charles V assembled 74 galleys, 300 transport ships, and 30,000 soldiers, advancing toward Tunis. Commander Hayreddin knew his fleet couldn't match the Spanish fleet, so he chose to flee. Charles V smoothly occupied Tunis city and burned Ottoman ships that hadn't escaped in time. The Tunis campaign was a key victory for Charles V in his rivalry with Suleiman, earning him great glory. But in subsequent confrontations, Charles V gradually lost his advantage. With the empire's robust strength, the Ottomans quickly rebuilt their fleet and returned. Thus erupted the second major battle between the two empires, the Battle of Preveza. From 1537 to 1538, the Ottoman fleet attacked a series of Venetian islands in the Aegean Sea. In response to the situation, Pope Paul III proposed forming a Holy League led by Spain and Venice to jointly oppose the Ottomans. Under the Pope's mediation, the League was finally formed, led by Spanish naval commander Doria. Doria led the fleet to join Venice. The League had 139 galleys versus the Ottomans' 90, a clear advantage, but Spain and Venice had conflicting strategic goals. Charles V's aim was to stop Ottoman expansion westward, but he didn't want to sacrifice for Venetian interests. On September 28, 1538, the two sides faced off in the Gulf of Preveza on Greece's western coast. And once fighting began, the vengeful Venetian fleet charged at the enemy with shouts.
But then, a strange scene unfolded. Spanish commander Doria's fleet held back, only firing long-range shots, and the isolated Venetian fleet was routed, failing their territory reclaim effort.
In the Battle of Preveza, the League lost 12 ships, mostly Venetian. No small scale, its political and psychological impact was huge. The Spanish fleet's passive fighting proved Western nations only cared about their own interests, failing to unite against Ottoman aggression. This deepened the Christian world's sense of panic.
People feared Ottoman raids might strike them any day.
Unlike the unified Ottomans, Europe was fragmented. Charles V faced Ottoman expansion while juggling complex European relations, especially wars with France. He fought intermittent wars with French King Francis I throughout his life. He spent more time and money on French wars than Ottoman conflicts. so Charles V lacked resources for an expensive arms race against Suleiman. After 1540, the Ottoman fleet clearly outnumbered Spain's. They frequently raided Italian and Spanish coastal towns, destroying settlements and capturing people, while Charles V couldn't stop them. In 1558, the exhausted Charles V died. His successor to the Spanish throne was Philip II. Facing worsening Mediterranean tensions, Spain launched a counterattack to retake strategic Tripoli in North Africa and regain control of the Central Axis. Their third major battle means the Battle of Jerba. With veteran commander Doria now aged, Philip II appointed his grandnephew Giovanni as fleet commander. This proved disastrous since Giovanni was a young man with no naval experience.
In spring 1560, the fleets met at Jerba. When the larger Ottoman fleet appeared, Giovanni panicked. Spanish ships fell into chaos and were decimated before forming battle lines.
After losing 30 galleys, Giovanni fled in disgrace. Though these naval defeats weren't catastrophic losses, they crushed Western morale. The Christian world was shrouded in fear of the Ottomans. Over half a century, the Mediterranean front had pushed westward to the sea's center. Suleiman's next target was strategically vital, Malta. Next up is the second part of the book, the defense of Malta, where the Turks' attack was thwarted. The Mediterranean can be divided into eastern and western parts. Along its central axis, there's a strait, 100 miles wide, between Tunis and Sicily. Malta is located at the center of the strait. On Malta's eastern shore, 6 kilometers inland, there's an excellent natural harbor. If Malta is held, Spain can use it as a base to reinforce southern European coasts and threaten Ottoman territories in North Africa. If Malta falls, the coastal regions of European nations will be defenseless, and the Ottomans will use it as a springboard to attack Sicily, Italy, and Spain. Because of its strategic importance, the Ottomans had long been planning an attack on Malta, but capturing Malta isn't easy. It's over 1,000 kilometers from Ottoman homeland, within range of the Spanish fleet. Moreover, Malta is very barren, with no trees or rivers, little fresh water, and scarce firewood.
This means the army's supply lines are long, and all needed supplies must be transported from outside throughout the campaign. The timing is also crucial.
The expedition must be carried out in just a few months and captured before winter arrives. Although Malta is difficult, Suleiman believed his powerful Ottoman army could easily capture it. After finalizing the battle plan, the entire empire went full steam ahead to prepare for this maritime adventure. To build more warships, shipyards worked day and night, the nation's transportation became very busy, and all kinds of war supplies were transported from across the country to Istanbul. Now let's look at Malta's defensive forces. There are 3 main fortresses on Malta. On the eastern shore, flanking the natural harbor, are 2 fortresses that are the core of the island's defense system. On the hill opposite these 2 fortresses, there's a small fortress called Fort St. Elmo. All 3 fortresses are small, incomplete, and urgently need repair and reinforcement. Especially Fort St. Elmo, which is the smallest and has very rudimentary facilities. At the core of Malta's defenders are 600 knights of the Order of St. John, with Grand Master La Valette as the supreme commander. The Order of St. John, also known as the Knights Hospitaller, was founded during the Crusades, initially to care for pilgrims in Jerusalem, later evolving into an armed force of the Church. Though few in number, they were fierce fighters, staunch defenders of Christendom. Additionally, there were mercenaries and local militia among the defenders, totaling about 6,000 to 8,000.
In late 1564, Malta's commander Valette learned of the Ottoman attack and immediately began intense preparations, especially repairing the island's 3 fortresses.
On May 18th, the following year, the Ottoman fleet arrived at Malta. It consisted of over 300 ships and 20,000 infantry, commanded by Mustafa. Hundreds of warships nearly covered half the sea. Such a massive Ottoman fleet sent chills down the defenders' spines. After surveying the island, Ottoman commanders targeted Fort St. Elmo. smallest and most isolated of the three fortresses. The Ottomans thought capturing this little fort would be a piece of cake, taking maybe 4 or 5 days. Commander Villette knew Fort St. Elmo's fall was inevitable, but he hoped the fortress would hold out as long as possible to strengthen the other two forts' defenses and buy time for reinforcements. So he ordered Fort St. Elmo's garrison to fight to the death, while nightly smuggling supplies across the bay into the fortress. The battle raged on. After 21 days, the Ottomans realized their critical mistake. They hadn't cut off the castle's supply line. They immediately secured the bay and launched fiercer attacks. Finally, out of ammunition and supplies, Fort St. Elmo fell. What was supposed to take 4 days lasted 27, costing 4,000 men, 1/6 of their total force. The earlier fighting wasted precious time.
So Commander Mustafa decided to take the other two forts at all costs, as quickly as possible.
After bombardments and skirmishes, the Ottomans planned an all-out assault. Since both forts hugged the coast, they attacked simultaneously by land and sea, catching defenders between two fronts. What? At dawn on July 15th, the final assault began with Ottomans attacking from land. They scrambled over each other up siege ladders while defenders rained bullets and Greek fire upon them.
One witness described the scene. Thick smoke, foul stench, mutilated corpses, clashing weapons, groans, and cannon wars.
I don't know if hell itself could depict this horrific battle.
At sea, Ottoman warships beached themselves as soldiers leaped ashore, clashing with defenders. Blood flowed like rivers beneath fortress walls and across beaches.
After a full day of brutal combat, the Ottoman assault was repelled. This single battle claimed over 4,000 lives from both sides.
Despite this failure, Ottoman commanders desperately pushed on. The longer the siege lasted, the worse their position became.
Midsummer heat intensified the stench of corpses everywhere, threatening epidemic outbreaks.
Plus, if Christian reinforcements arrived, victory would become hopeless.
The savage fighting continued day after day. By late August, both sides committed their final reserves.
Since the siege began, Commander Villette sent one desperate plea for help after another.
Though King Philip II of Spain knew Malta's value, he remained inactive. Spain's earlier defeat at Jerba had instilled deep fear of the Ottoman fleet. Despite rebuilding their navy at great cost, Philip feared another defeat would leave Spain defenseless, leaving him paralyzed by indecision. Finally, on August 20th, he ordered Admiral Don Garcia to relieve Malta but forbade direct engagement with Ottoman forces. And Somerville, on September 7th, Villette's long-awaited reinforcements finally reached Melilla Bay in Malta. Luckily, no Ottoman guards were there. 10,000 soldiers landed smoothly before the fleet swiftly withdrew. News of the landing stunned Ottoman commanders. Now they'd have to retreat in disgrace. But just then, a traitorous soldier gave them intelligence. The reinforcements numbered under 6,000, were food-deprived and combat-weak. After such heavy losses, yet the Malta offensive had failed. To salvage some honor, he gambled everything, leading 10,000 troops to crush the disorganized relief force. But this false intelligence spelled disaster for the Ottomans.
The relief force actually had 10,000 well-supplied, heavily armed soldiers.
Plus, after 4 months of tough fighting, the Ottomans were totally worn out, while the reinforcements were fresh, full of energy and high morale. On September 11th, the two armies clashed at St. Paul's Bay in Malta, and the battle turned into a total one-sided affair. Under the fierce charge of the reinforcements, the Ottoman defense line was hanging by a thread. Seeing this, Commander Mustafa rushed to the front lines, leading from the front and jumping into the fight.
But it was no use. The Ottoman army soon collapsed like a house of cards. Scattered soldiers tried to flee to ships on the shore, with reinforcements hot on their heels. The beach instantly became a slaughterhouse, littered with Ottoman bodies on the sand and in the water. The battle ended in a crushing defeat for the Ottomans. The victory in defending Malta spared Christendom from a huge disaster. To honor Commander Villette's achievements, Malta's capital was later named after him. But Western nations knew darn well this was just a lucky win, and the Ottomans would be back for sure. Next up is part 3 of the book, The Battle of Lepanto, the Ottoman Revenge, and the Christians' Desperate Counterattack. The year after the Malta Campaign, Suleiman the Magnificent, who'd lived a warrior's life, passed away. Selim II took the throne, becoming the new sultan. According to imperial tradition, a new sultan needed to score a victory in a foreign war. Selim II chose a Venetian colony as his first military target after taking power. The island of Cyprus was super close to the Ottoman Empire, but way far from Venice, hundreds of nautical miles away. This place had super fertile land, rich in resources, producing goods like grain, cotton, wine, and salt.
It sat on a key Ottoman trade route, guarded by the Knights of St. John. These knights often attacked Ottoman ships, basically stirring up trouble right under the empire's nose.
Selim II was dead set on pulling out this thorn. In March 1570, he sent Venice a toughly worded letter demanding they hand Cyprus over to the Ottomans. And the Guardians, since the Battle of Preveza in 1538, when Venice and Spain teamed up, Venice hadn't fought a war for over 30 years. It couldn't compete militarily and just wanted to do business in peace. So, for ages, it played the role of trade partner and ally to the Ottomans, often tipping them off about Spanish fleet movements. To the Western world, it also claimed to be the Christian front against the Ottomans and fed them intelligence about Ottoman movements. For years, Venetians told men what they wanted to hear and devils what they feared, surviving between empires through masterful diplomacy. But the Ottomans' brazen territorial demand crossed Venice's red line. Cyprus brought Venice continuous wealth. Naturally, they wouldn't surrender it willingly. Besides, even if they appeased the Ottomans now, they'd surely demand more later. The Venetian Senate voted for war by an overwhelming majority of 195 to 5. Ottoman leaders believed Venice couldn't possibly defend distant Cyprus. Their only fear was Western nations uniting for another crusade, but 2 centuries of experience showed Christendom was too fragmented to unite against enemies. Thus, Ottomans saw Cyprus as theirs for the taking, but events would defy their expectations. The same year as the Cyprus crisis, Spain faced its own trouble. Spain's puppet regime in Tunis was overthrown by pirate Uluç Ali, returning it to Ottoman control.
Amid this, Pope Pius V proposed Spain, Venice, and the Papal States reform the Holy League against the Ottomans.
But Spain and Venice had clashing goals. Venice to save Cyprus, Spain to retake Tunis. To bridge differences, the Pope mediated tirelessly, pledging papal treasury funds. Through his persistent efforts, and yes, financial incentives, the Holy League finally united to rescue Cyprus. Funding was allocated. Spain paid half, Venice 1/3, the papacy the rest. Command went to Philip II's adventurous half-brother, Don John of Austria. Don John lacked naval experience, but key League commanders were seasoned veterans. Venice, though war untested for 30 years, retained its naval heritage, swiftly building over 100 galleys. Venetians called these ships galleasses. In the coming naval battle, these 6 ships played a crucial role. By September 1571, the Holy League fleet assembled 230 warships and 26,000 soldiers. Morale soared. Every soldier was itching to take on the Ottomans. On September 29th, scouts reported the Ottoman fleet at their base in Lepanto, Greece, so the fleet set sail toward Lepanto. Then on October 4th, shocking news arrived. Cyprus had fallen. Helplessly, some commanders proposed turning back, but most disagreed. Thirst for revenge and military honor drove them to fight the Ottomans to the death.
Thus, the fleet pressed on toward Lepanto.
Lepanto guards the Gulf of Corinth entrance. The Ottoman fleet had 300-plus warships under Ali. With strong walls and shore guns, they'd be invincible if staying put. But Selim II underestimated his foes. He believed Western nations were divided, weak-willed, and lacked combat spirit, too scared to face Ottoman main forces. Confident, he ordered Ali. If enemy fleets appear, annihilate them. The Sultan's command forced Ali to attack, not defend. On October 7th, the two armies met at Lepanto, about 600 warships and 140,000 men. The largest naval battle in Mediterranean history began.
At sea, both fleets formed 6-kilometer-wide battle lines with left, center, right divisions. The League had a fourth, reserves.
The League flagship was Laurel, Ottoman's was Sultana. League ships were larger with heavier firepower.
But they were clumsier. Ottoman ships were more numerous, smaller, and nimbler.
The sides were evenly matched. Naval tactics started with cannon or arquebus fire, then ramming enemy ships with battering rams.
Next, soldiers would storm enemy decks from the prow for hand-to-hand combat.
Since the prow was crucial, galleys mounted 3 to 5 forward-facing cannons there. At battle start, ships faced prow to prow, never exposing vulnerable sides or sterns. Same for Lepanto. The League fleet started in a straight line, planning to break through the center with superior firepower, while the Ottomans formed a crescent formation.
Their tactic was using numerical and mobility advantages to flank enemy broadsides. 6 Venetian galleasses led the League fleet, their firepower devastating. At 150 meters, they opened fire, sinking 3 Ottoman ships instantly and shattering their center.
Before close combat, 1/3 of Ottoman ships were sunk or crippled.
Despite this, Ottomans charged through fierce cannon fire.
The Ottoman right wing flanked the League's left before they could react, circling around their battle line's end.
Now, the League's left fell into disarray, but reserves rushed to reinforce, with a galleass joining the rescue. With backup, the left gradually turned the tide, repelling the Ottoman right wing.
The Ottoman right wing commander fell in the chaos. Seeing this, his troops abandoned ships and fled ashore. League soldiers rowed boats to the beach, slaughtering them. With the right defeated, both centers clashed.
Ships rammed violently. Soldiers boarded enemy decks for brutal close combat in cramped spaces.
As front fighters fell, others surged over corpses. Decks ran with blood. Even the sea turned red, as soldiers dragged enemies into the depths to die together. Flagships, Laurel and Sultana, collided, locked in a death duel. A savage melee erupted on deck. Both commanders joined the fighting.
La Real had 800 men, Sultana only 300. Outmatched, nearly all Ottomans died. Admiral Ali was beheaded.
The Ottoman center began collapsing. Though right and center faltered, the battle wasn't lost yet. The Ottoman left also tried flanking the League's right. To avoid encirclement, the League's right kept drifting outward, widening the gap from their center. A 300-meter gap opened between the two formations.
Seeing this, the Ottoman left-wing commander ordered an immediate turn to charge the gap, fiercely attacking the League's center's flank. The tide turned instantly. Many League ships sank.
Had the Ottomans succeeded earlier, it might have changed the battle's outcome.
But by then, the Ottoman center had collapsed, while the League center stabilized, fully engaging the enemy.
The League's right wing reinforced the center. Seeing all hope lost, the Ottoman left withdrew, securing the League's naval victory. In 4 brutal hours, 40,000 died, nearly 100 ships sank, and 137 Ottoman vessels were captured. Lepanto's casualty scale wasn't surpassed until World War I. The battle's course. With that covered, let's examine the battle's significance. First, it halted Ottoman expansion. Had the Holy League not won, they couldn't have stopped the Ottoman fleet. Key Mediterranean islands, Malta, Crete, even Spain's Balearics, would have fallen. Ottomans could have used them to attack mainland Europe, reshaping Mediterranean power and imperial destinies. The author notes, without galleasses disrupting the Ottoman center, or had their left broken through an hour earlier, southern Europe's map would look drastically different. Second, it massively boosted Christendom's confidence.
Since Constantinople in 1453, the Ottoman Empire had relentlessly devoured Christian lands until controlling the eastern Mediterranean.
Repeated defeats convinced Christendom they couldn't defeat the Ottomans. For decades, Europeans lived in terror of Ottoman forces appearing on the western Mediterranean coast. Lepanto's few hours shattered that fear. As Cervantes wrote through Don Quixote, what a colossal error to believe the Turks invincible at sea. Lastly, it ended Mediterranean conflict. Despite generations paying steep costs, the Ottomans never defeated Christian nations. Even the mighty Ottomans had limits. Their war resources and elite soldiers weren't infinite. They realized conquering the entire Mediterranean through naval expansion was too hard, so continuing this rivalry wasn't worth it. Spain also knew it couldn't retake Tunis in North Africa, and Charles V's dream of reclaiming Constantinople? Impossible. In 1580, Philip II and the Sultan signed a treaty, ending the empire's Mediterranean war for good. All right, that wraps up our take on Empires of the Sea, the contest for the center of the world. Reading notes are below the audio. Catch you next time.